Okay. Hello, Isoke.
Hi.
So I'm here with Isoke Femi. Is that how I say your last name?
Femi.
Femi, who works with Glide Church in San Francisco, Glide Memorial
Church and Foundation.
and Foundation. And she's known as the Maven of Transformative Learning, which I love, and I know you as. So we're here today to open up a conversation with a lot of permission and spaciousness, not knowing where it's going to take us, but holding the ideas of soul and racial healing and cultural transformation and what's needed now, us individually, collectively. And so we're not necessarily going to be looking over here, but we're going to have our own conversation. We'd like you to join us and be with us.
Yeah. That is a tall order, right? That's a lot there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cultural transformation, racial healing, soul work. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. At Glide, when I talk about transformative learning, there's a parallel concept at Glide that is about recovery. One of Glide's values is that we're all in recovery. And I love that because they obviously don't mean that everybody's in recovery from some kind of addiction,
Right.
or some kind of problematic or culturally agreed upon problematic addiction, but rather like the addiction to self-loathing, the addiction to separation, the addiction to accepting things how they are, the addiction to individualism, where we place the blame or the responsibility for people's failures and successes only on them. We don't look at the structural issues. So there's so much that we can be in recovery about, and I love that because I run the summer internship program there. And when the interns come in and they get told, hey, we're going to do recovery work, it's a great thing because they kind of know, right, that they're in recovery from, social constraints that keep them small. They're in recovery from problematic relationships with their parents and with their hometowns and that kind of stuff. So they don't argue at all. They're like, yeah, we need to be in recovery around those things.
Right.
And so a transformative agenda, starts from the standpoint of what needs to be released. What aspects of identity need to be allowed to fall away.
That's not easy work.
Not easy work at all, because we think that our identity is us. So any threat to identity is perceived as a threat to us.
Right.
And
Yeah, that brings up an important question. I mean, starting with identity is probably a good place to start. And one of the things, and I shared this with you earlier, is on Facebook, once I saw you write that you were interested in holding the Course in Miracles, the truth in that, as well as the truth of what Joy DeGruy, who wrote the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And I was astonished that you would be holding such a vast, these seem to be polarities, right? And how you could do that, how you could be in that place. I don't know a lot about the Course in Miracles, but I know it's a unifying principle. And then if we're going to look at the post-traumatic slave syndrome, that's a very deep piece that you can't sit. I don't know how to sit in unity and hold that yet. And that's why I was like, well, I want to know how she does this. Which, and maybe we'll get there later, but there's spirit, which is this oneness. There's soul, which goes down and is deep and deeply personal. And so maybe we can talk a little about soul, a little about spirit, and how you're holding the realities of the world while working with spirit and soul. So I know that's a lot, but
yeah, no, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk about it, and I just want to say to everyone, to you, to everyone, I don't have any answers.
Yeah.
I do not have any answers. I only have a deep curiosity and lots of places from which I draw for imagination, to imagine various responses to the questions. But I don't really know.
Right.
So when you talk about A Course in Miracles, and I don't feel complete with this at all, but I'm sitting with several big invitations from the Course. One being, and it goes back to biblical times, is be in the world but not of it, right? So the author of A Course in Miracles repeats that again, the invitation is to be in the world but not of it, and I'm like, what? Right? How do you be in the world and not of it?
Yeah.
So that's one. And how do you have forgiveness about everything? The definition of forgiveness in the Course is very different from the world's definition of forgiveness. The world defines forgiveness as, you stepped on my toe, that was a bad thing you did, but I forgive you.
And now it's over.
And now it's over.
Right.
The Course talks about forgiveness as in, you actually release yourself from the belief that it even happened.
What?
Right? So this makes it very,
Wow.
very difficult to talk about Holocaust, slavery.
Because you're not re-imprinting, you're not pulling the past as an energetic forward?
Well,
or what is
no,
the
that
idea behind that?
it sounds like you're denying.
No,
that
I
these,
know.
Right?
But
So-
what is the deeper wisdom of what is that part of like not pulling something energetically into the present, or what's the deeper?
Well, it's curious, right? Because let's take Buddhism or Hinduism or some of the other Eastern philosophies and religions that already agree that this that we call reality is actually a dream, is actually illusion.
See, I can hear this from you, but when a white person tells me this, I cannot hear it. That's partly why I want to, I don't trust it when a white person says it. But then,
I don't trust it when I say it.
Yeah, so
That's
yeah,
what I mean when I
yeah.
say I'm still grappling with. I'm still trying to grow into a deeper understanding of what this means. Because I am here. And in the world of perception, these things are happening.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's a response required from me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I love is that you're living into a question. And part of my impetus for having this conversation is I get reactive and fed up with the conversations around this issue that feel like there's a moralistic tone, there's a right way to do it, and if you're not doing it, you need to get your ass in gear. And I just find it exhausting and sad. I feel grief around it. It's like, can't we do this differently? So I love that you're bringing a question, because then when we get to grow into it, it's not like you said, you don't know. I'm touched by that.
Yeah, I don't know. And there's another piece that the Course offers. It's tangential to the Course, but it's still coming through that same lineage. And the idea is that love embraces all things, accepts all things, allows all things, and thereby transcends all things.
Transcends.
Right. So we, those of us who practice a soul psychology or a soul approach to living are a little nervous about the idea of transcending.
Right.
But when you have sat with something and you've allowed it and you've embraced it, then you actually, in a way, you have earned the right to transcend it. The kind of transcendence that we have an allergic reaction to is that kind of transcendence that doesn't live deeply into the what is. It just wants to jump over the what is and get to the transcendent, right? And I think that's what is insulting to the soul.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm trying to learn how to accept my outrage about racism, about structural racism, about the continued denial, all of it. Accept that is true for me. I'm outraged about that. I sometimes want to fight fire with fire. I have to accept that I want to do that. Allow that the part of me, and here we get to the multiplicity, right? There's a part of me that's like, why? Is there something we did as a collective, as Africans, that this is not payback for, not even karma, but just like, okay, one way of looking at it, did we sign up for this so that out of some desire to take humanity further along the trajectory, or are we experiencing some kind of karmic thing? Because it's like, why us, you know? Why? You can't help but ask that question. So from the standpoint of multiplicity, that's one of the questions that arises.
Wow.
Why us?
You must get pushback on that question. I've never sat with that question. That's
Well, my son and I have asked this, I mean, for many years, since he was probably 17, you know, we started talking about this.
right.
Yeah, so you know, these deeper questions, and I think that this it be in the world but not of it gives that kind of space. I think if you literalize everything about the so-called reality that we see, you become very brittle, and any questioning of it can feel like a threat.
Right.
Well, I'm kind of past that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to not ask because it hurts my feelings, or it hurts somebody else's feelings. Although I understand that. So that line of questioning has taken me even into the terrain around what's really up with whiteness. Like, I'm very, very curious about whiteness right now, and I'm excited and fascinated by some of the what's bubbling up to the surface of my mind in response to what's happening with white people.
You want to say more about what's bubbling up?
Yeah, it feels big. Although I don't. After I shared this with someone, they said, "Oh, you have to listen to John Trudell, I think his name is, this Native American man who's been saying this and more." I had never heard of him. But one day, I do a lot of TV watching, and one day I was watching this show about castles in Europe, primarily in, you know, Welsh and Scottish and English and Irish castles. And I'm watching these shows, and it dawns on me that some of these castles have 1,100-year-old history. They've been around for 1,100 years. And I'm looking, and I'm like, who lived there? I mean, sure, the royals lived there, but how many serfs and servants did it take to run that place?
Right.
And to care for the, you know, the ones inside and outside the castle, right? And I started thinking about, those are the people who came here. At least 90% of the people who came here from England were that lower echelon of people.
Right.
And they had many, many, many more centuries of embeddedness in the Lord and the Master over the serf and the servant than we have ever had, that we had, right? And I thought, oh, we're asking white people to be allies when they don't even remember what happened to them,
No, we don't.
right? And they came to a point of just saying, this is the natural order. This is the natural order. You can't fight it. There will always be those who are smarter, richer, have more gun power, blah, 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 blah. And they're always going to be us. And so the best thing we can do is try to stay under the radar, but never having attended to the trauma. The multi generations of trauma, not only from living under that kind of exploitation, the class exploitation, but the church. Like, you know, the stripping away of earth-based religions and goddess, and
We colonized ourselves first, is one way I've heard it said. And then we went out and did the same. Or, you know,
yeah, I know that that's said, but in my mind, I see it more as the 1% have always been there. So it wasn't the serfs who colonized themselves. Yes, they collapsed under it, and they colluded with their own oppression just like we do today. But that's different from colonizing oneself.
Meaning the Europeans against the Europeans, whether it was the ones with power colonizing the ones who
Yeah.
didn't.
Oh, yeah.
But
I see what you mean.
The
Yes,
Europeans
yes.
colonized the Europeans first.
Yes, exactly. And that's what when I'm watching this and I'm like going, they all look alike. So on the basis of what did they know? How did they know to kill you if you look just like them? Right? So this, and then to call black on black crime something special, like it's like, whoa, what a weird thing. It's like,
with violent people. Yeah.
well, I don't think so. I think that people have always fought what they saw in the mirror
Right.
and tried to kill off what they saw in the mirror.
So it's interesting because, I mean, what you're bringing is, in some ways, empathy, right? Trying to understand the wound. Why would someone act this way? Why would someone be complicit, or, right? And it's, again, there's often this thing for me of who I'm hearing it from. I respond differently depending on who I'm hearing it from. And there are a number of white people who would bring up, how the Irish were treated, or, things like this. And then that's not received very well, because it all depends on the motivation. Why are we bringing this fact forward?
Yes.
What's behind it?
Yes.
Right? And so somehow we have to find a way to hold it all, but keep looking at what is the motivation for this particular piece we're bringing, and what do we hope for when we bring it forth,
Mm-hmm.
Are we hoping for healing, or are we hoping to minimize what's going on today for African Americans or you people,
Right, right. And for me, regardless of where it's coming from on their side, this is arising in me for a reason, and I trust that.
Right.
It has nothing to do with white people didn't get me there.
Yeah.
If anything, white people delayed my getting here for the very reasons that you're pointing out. This pseudo-innocence, using the history of white oppression as a way to not deal with the oppression of people of color. So that kind of delayed me. But it was inevitable that I get here. Why? Because I live with white people all the time. I've been living with white people since I was 11 years old. And so I've seen the souls of white folks. I've seen the soullessness of white folks. Seen the loss of soul, the soul loss. So I think that it is a developmental question, and I do think there are a lot of white people, young white people, who have hit a different place with this than previously.
Yeah.
They are not messing around, They are like, they are really trying to go for responsibility. I think sometimes problematically, because they want to, again, it's this splitting tendency of the psyche. They're the bad white people and the good white people. And so white people are playing that game also. They always have, but it's young activists, white activists, are holding white people's feet to the fire in some problematic ways, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that, because that's part of why I want to bring soul into the conversation, where I see there's some limitations and repeating patterns that aren't helpful. Even though sometimes I think we need a wake-up call, and it's not always comfortable, to say the least. But can you say anything about that, about what's not working? What do you think would create a change in that?
Well, I mean, one of my issues with the left, with everybody, so she says self-righteously, is the literalizing mind, and the mind that can't zoom out and see the archetypal patterns. So you sit in these circles, these activist circles, and there is a constriction of energy just based on the fear of doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. It becomes, it's like a straitjacket. It's a straitjacket culture. And I'm no more interested in being in a culture like that than I am in being in the Tea Party. So I think that because we have not, and it's interesting to me, because I think that the left The left doesn't have religion, doesn't have depth psychology, doesn't really have. It just feels like it's a very literal. It's a very literal group, out of defensiveness.
Which almost becomes its own religion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that saddens me.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much life force there. It's like the only life force there is you better do the right thing, or you better, why aren't you at that rally? And this is the way you got to show up, or you're either one of us, or you're
Right.
with us or against us. That's where the life force is coming from. But what about all the rest, and I guess some celebration too around the places where we successfully fight oppression or whatever. There's some celebration there, but there's a self-righteousness, a kind of just rigidified consciousness that says, I would never do that.
Right.
Like those people do those things. And I think that's one of the sad things about the movement not having depth psychology or any other, it doesn't have to be psychology, it could be any tradition that says, who was the poet that said the evil cuts through the human heart across all, you know what I mean? Like, we all are vulnerable to hatred, right? And at one point I was going to write my dissertation on hatred. And I was looking at hatred as this, a weaving of various, like, envy, revenge, resentment, stinginess, narcissistic rage, these that most people would not consider hateful, right? The hate has people can say, I don't hate, but what about being stingy? What about, psychologically stingy, not like materially stingy.
So broadening the whole concept of hate, so we get to include ourselves and see ourselves in that.
Yes, and when you do that, then people can say, oh yeah, I actually have had that or felt that, but most of us still think, I only do that in reaction to somebody hurting me. Few people actually say, no, there have been times when I just did it. In my dissertation, in my intro, I write about my mother. And my mother was a very intense woman who was very hurt, had a lot of distress, and didn't want this particular kid who was born, for a lot of good reasons, I think. And she was a person who was just like a hellion. Like when you hear about people,
I don't know what that word means.
a hellion is somebody who raises hell a lot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah? And she would actually say, she'd look at me. I was a little kid. She'd look at me and she said, look, I got hell in me today, so you better stay out of my damn way. And there was a time when I that story, I would use that story to show how hurt I was by my mother. But today I use that story as an example of someone who actually owned her own stuff. Owned,
Tried to protect you in a way, of like, just so you know.
Exactly, right? And it wasn't like, oh, I don't feel, it was like I got hell in me. I love that.
I love that you can shift your relationship to it. That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah, it is. It is. So how many of us are even self-aware enough to know, I just feel like being mean.
That's part of what I'm hoping to bring, because I kind of track, better than anything else I track probably in my psyche, is all the different parts of my white psyche. And the part that wants to hold on to my piece of the pie, and the part that wants to defend why I have money and you don't, and you know, and there's strong parts, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and the part that's like, I kind of like capitalism, it's working for me, you know, and, you know, and the part that's afraid when I see a black person down the street and it's dark and I'm in a neighborhood I've never been in, all those parts,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and my hope is to kind of bring that forth because like you're saying, it's so scary for so many of us to like, we're afraid, and I'm afraid too of saying the wrong thing, you know, but if we can give ourselves spaciousness around that, then everything becomes more fluid, and also then we don't identify with, I'm the good white person, I'm the bad white person, I'm the good ally, I'm an accomplice, I'm not an accomplice, I'm a low risk ally, I'm sorry, you know, like, it's just so, that's what I'm hoping to bring, and that's also why I was excited. We shared the same grad school, we have some of the same languaging,
Yes.
you know, that we're not one self.
Right.
We're not one self.
Right.
And so how can we possibly engage this such a complex topic already, and then if we're one self, it becomes that fundamentalism and nothing moves. It's just more of this.
Yes.
So I want movement from a deep place, you know, and it's slow. I think that's what's hard. At least that's my experience. It's a freaking slow process.
You know, I was thinking like right now, I don't know if I don't think I speak for, I don't want to speak for other black people, but I have this feeling that black people never really needed white people to not think or feel the way that the ways that they've been trained to think and feel. Just needed honesty.
Right.
And needed, I mean, not like where you're being hit with it constantly, because nobody wants to be reminded all the time like, oh, you know, I'm scared of you.
Right.
Right? But more like, yeah, I got this conditioning.
Right.
I did. I got this conditioning, and it's still with me.
Right.
I still, when I see a Gerber baby, a white Gerber baby, it evokes in me tender, protective feelings in a way that a black baby the same age just doesn't, you know? Just an acknowledgement of that. Like, so
Right.
I think that's all part of the development, where we're headed. And in some places that's happening. But you cannot make people get there. One of my friends, have you ever seen The Color of Fear?
I can't believe I haven't, but no, I haven't. Yeah.
Well, when you see it, you know,
That white person.
there's an African American man in there who plays a prominent role, Victor, and he and I have been friends for a long time, and he said to me once, he said, Isoke, nobody will learn from someone who holds them in disdain. So, and when he said it, I was like, of course. I mean, I those words never came out of my mouth, but when he said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's totally true.
Right.
We'll pretend to learn, we'll go hide,
Right.
but we will not really learn from people who hold us in contempt. Contempt is another aspect of hate.
Right.
So
then there's that whole question of creating safety, and then there's this whole issue what safety is, and white people wanting to feel safe, and I mean, so how do you create a container that allows soul to arise?
I'm really glad you said that, and I have that comes up all the time. People say brave spaces versus safe spaces, and I'm not ready to give up the word safe. Why? Because I was a little kid who got her ass kicked by people in my own community and outside my community, and I did not feel safe. So to me, I have a very personal relationship to safety. It's not for me. I like it. I like feeling safe. Thank you very much. I don't think it's sinful to want to feel safe. I do know that there's a difference between safety and comfort. I do know that I can feel unsafe when I'm not actually unsafe. Still, it's important to me that that conditions exist where I can learn, right? Because even if it's not safe, if an environment is riddled with an attitude of punishment, tyranny, even if it's subtle tyranny. I need a drink.
Yeah.
It's not a learning field. A learning field can be, well, we can learn. We'll learn. What will we learn? We will learn that it's not safe to be me. We will learn that it's not safe to make a mistake. I don't like that we deny how tender the heart is and how sensitive people really are.
Right.
So here's where ritual comes in. Right? Because when you create a ritual space, a whole lot of craziness can happen in there
right.
without people getting freaked out.
We're personalizing it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
When you work archetypally, it's not about the person. In my dissertation, I invited people to bring an ancestor. People came in there with all kind of crazy stuff that if they were just being Betty or John or whoever, people would have been really upset with them for saying those things.
Right.
But we were in ritual space.
Beautiful.
And people just fell into it like a river. They just responded.
Yeah.
So I think there are ways to bring critical, angry, disruptive energies without shutting things down. And I think the primary way of doing that is through ritual.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that.
And it's fun.
It is so fun, and so much transformation happens. It's not, we don't all stay up in our heads, and
Exactly.
we start moving things, not just in our bodies, but in the whole field. I mean, it's a whole another ballgame. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think in time,
I want to go back to something, but after that, just marking white fragility.
yes, because I think in time, ritual is a way, it's kind of like going to the gym. You kind of develop more robustness. And so then when you're not in ritual space and some of these intense energies are kicked up, you have more muscle for it. You're not as fragile in the face of them. Because we can't always, create a ritual on the spot, right? But if we use ritual to help develop that ability to stay present in the face of these, like Arnie Mindell talks about sitting in the fire.
Yeah. Maybe I don't want to go back to that other piece. Let's just sit there for a moment. That's the essence of where I feel whatever my gift is in this whole thing lies in something there, in ritual, in the non-linear, in the ancestors, in showing up for something and not knowing exactly what's going to happen, but having an intention, So, yeah, I feel like we need more of that.
And it's way more who we really are. We've been, operating from here for a lot less time than we've been operating more whole,
Right.
in a whole-bodied way and soulful way.
Yeah.
Using play and ritual. Those are our the soul's native languages. Yeah.
Right. Just check in there. Yeah.
So-
Well, I will go back to that just for a minute since it's such a buzzword right now in terms of white fragility and safety. And I heard one person, I don't know if you know Nikki or Mickey Cashton. No, she does the MVC and she works a lot with privilege. But she said she found it to be a very sad use of the word fragility, that we all have fragility. And I know what the term is referring to, our incapacity to actually be in those conversations and where we go with that, whether we react or collapse but there was just something inviting about the way you were holding all of our tenderness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I grew up with trauma, so for me enter, and this is part of the reason I have come into the race conversation and left it, and
Yep,
come
yep,
and left
yep. Mm-hmm.
for so long. Because I grew up with a rageaholic, alcoholic, insanity, field. And and even if my husband raises his voice, my nervous system is so sensitive to that energy. I just don't do well with it. So I'm grateful I've found a container where I can work with these issues, and there's a lot of love and laughter, and we get to work with it. But there's a field of love, which to me is a miracle on earth. It is a miracle that I can be in this mixed race group and we love each other and we're holding this difficult issue together. I'm
That's
telling
beautiful.
you, it is a miracle. I just don't see that. I don't see that enough, And I feel like that's what we're all hungry for. There's so many of us, we do want to work with these, but we don't necessarily want to be thrown into containers that are just constantly, people leave feeling either just swimming in shame or collapsed or hopeless or angry, or it's just, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because this is another little piece of the white theorizing that I've done, where I realized one day, I was watching The New Yorker. The New Yorker has, they've created short videos based on the magazine.
Oh.
And one of them is about cowboys.
Mm.
So I was watching this one day, and the opening scene has a 7-year-old boy who just got he's thrown from a calf, and he's hurt and his knees are scraped and he's crying, and the man who's training him is like fierce and unbending in his, like, you cannot cry. You cannot cry. Okay? You are not hurt.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my God, this runs counter to everything that I've been learning as a member of white, middle class, well-educated community.
Mm.
This is disgusting. This hurts my feelings. This is terrible. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Not that, all that, okay, so that's, yeah, I actually had a nervous system reaction to this. And a lot of people would just condemn it on the basis of that, and on the basis of whatever theories we have about child abuse and how to raise children and free children and, all that.
Right.
But I didn't want to stop there. I'm like, what? There's something important here. So I watched it all the way, the whole segment, and there's this culture, cowboy culture. It is not just that tough, you don't get to cry. There's pride, there's, showmanship, there's hard work, like, oh my God, the work ethic is really strong. I'm not even a believer in work ethic, but it doesn't matter. That culture wants to be appreciated. And I found myself sitting there going, I appreciate this. And I don't know if it was in Wyoming or where, but it didn't hurt that the scene, the nature was so gorgeous. And I was like, now, these are the people who have been left out of any conversation about anything. Because they're not educated, they're not, they're not, the white people who are setting the stage for how you're supposed to be in the world are not those people. Not only that, if you grow up in one of those families and you don't fit, many people leave those families to come to places like this so that they can have more freedom. So in a certain way, the cream is being siphoned off, just as it is in black communities, where people like myself are siphoned off of out of the community and taken other places where we're not nearly as much needed.
We're not as needed? What do you mean by that?
People need me at home. I could do a lot of good back home.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, you're not as much needed, so you're not as much needed here. Okay, yeah.
Right? So, in a sense, like the people of color, the queers, the college-educated white have taken these people from home. And I thought, that's a wound. There's what we're seeing out on the streets with the white demonstrating. In a sense, I think this is a factor.
Wow. You're going where no man or woman has gone before. These are new thoughts. I haven't heard them.
I mean,
Interesting.
you took our kids. This world that is foreign to us is taking our kids and leaving us, with, and here's the real kicker. Leaving us with these labels of like all you are as white is privileged and oppressor. There's nothing else to you. At least there's nothing else to you that's of value. That was not sustainable. It's not sustainable to tell any group of people this is all you are. I don't care how true it is even. First of all, it's not true. Can't be true. You know what I mean? Can't be true.
Say more. So that's all there is to them, or what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like, they rock babies and love babies and nurse babies and keep people safe and send people off to work with food and try to keep the fires going. And, they do so much more than oppress and have privilege.
So you're one of those people who just refuses to dehumanize anybody. You want to see
Unless I'm
humanity.
mad. If I'm mad at somebody, I will try really hard. But usually I end up,
Yeah.
coming back to some more reasonable place. But yeah, it's like, and I feel like our future as a species really depends on this. That we stop trying to make ourselves feel better at the expense of the others. Like I don't call white supremacy anymore.
What
I
was
just
that choice based on?
just call it white insecurity on steroids. Like the human race is insecure. The human race is insecure. Everybody has, we learned at school the I factor. Inadequate, incomplete, inferior. Whether we mask it or bury it or pretend that it's not there, we all are pretty much coming from a place of doubt about our worth. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And in collectives, we codify that inadequacy, that insecurity, and we build up structures to make ourselves not feel it, not, yeah.
Project it out on somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one place we could start is by not, and here comes, the law of attraction or more of the metaphysics of energy. Like when, I heard it again today, where the mind goes, energy flows, right? So if your mind, if the mind and the collective mind and the individual minds keep saying white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, what are you doing?
Interesting. It's funny, I've been having a reaction to that word lately, but my meaning making was just too in my face real. Like privilege is a little softer, so that's how it was the meaning I was making, but it's interesting to hear how you're holding it.
Right, because like you look at these guys, the cowboys, they will tell you 6 ways from Sunday how they are not privileged.
Right.
The problem is that they've been trained to think that I am the reason that they have lost privilege,
Right.
and I am the one who has more privilege than they do. because I think the terror of ever turning against the master is just, it's deep, it's I don't even know how old it is. And I think it's true for all of us, really, to like, the master, we'll kill each other off before we'll look at the master and say, oh, you're the one. And it's not, yeah, even that's problematic, but it's easier to be mad at me, to be mad at gay people, queer people, whoever, than to actually know. The people who brought your ancestors here treated them as bad as they treat me. And when they saw that there was a possibility that we could all work together, they made sure that that couldn't happen. So,
Bacon rebellion, right? Yeah.
you know.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I think I'm feeling about 5 more minutes in my
Okay.
in my blood sugar. But I do want to just bridge this one question, because you and I are both very psyche, soul oriented, and then I'm always wondering, like, how do I address systemic change? Like I said before we started, maybe that's not my gift, and maybe that's not what I am here to bring, and maybe I have to accept that. But I am part of a system, and how do I bring this little soul-centered self to that question? So I just wondered, how do you hold that?
I don't know. I can tell you that when Chrissy Field, when there was all the upset about Chrissy Fields and that the white supremacists were coming and neo-Nazis were coming and they were going to have this demonstration, I prayed that nobody from my side of the fence would go. Just don't go. You're feeding what you hate. Why would you do that, right? But this requires a sort of an agreement around energy and how we manifest what we don't want, thinking that we're trying to manifest what we do want.
Right.
But we actually don't talk about what we want that much. We talk about what we don't want.
It's true.
So my idea was, what if you had 10,000 people at home meditating on peace while this is going on? And you had somehow people could actually connect with some website or something and know how many are doing it. And that would feed, that's what you want to feed. Oh my God, I'm part of 10,000. Oh my God, now we're up to 15,000. Oh my God, this many people are meditating on peace right now. I'm part of a virtual community. I don't have to even leave my house to have an effect. But to do that, we'd have to be open to ideas around non-locality, right? That I actually can affect something over there from here.
It's it's a paradigm shift. Yeah. So I'm asking about something so concrete, and you're responding with like the completely energetic. So you have faith in that. You have faith if we engage the energetic level, these structures will change.
I really do. I mean, I have a fantasy. Okay, you don't want to see so many black men going to prison. All right, get a group and say, well, whenever some man is on trial, we're going to go to the courthouse. We're going to sit in the courtroom quietly and peacefully, and we're going to just see that judge making the right decision. See the DA making the right decision. See the prisoner, the defendant, showing up in his true, he or she really is. Not just the distress, but just we're gonna create this picture with our minds and with our energetic fields. And what could we lose?
Right.
Nobody would even know what they're doing. So we're not trying to draw attention. We're actually trying to manifest something different. So I don't
Yeah.
have very many people in my corner on this one yet.
That's
But-
where life keeps going, you need to look over here. And I'm like, really? But that's what life keeps telling me. This is your next evolutionary step. You cannot just hold all the horrors of what has happened and all the horrors of what is continuing to happen and try to like shake people awake. You're done. That's over.
Exactly.
Now you have to go over here, find a way to hold both, and stop going, I'm not going to do that because it's like spiritual bypass. No. For me, it's not. I've done a lot of deep work.
Yes.
So this is not spiritual bypass. It's my next step. So I appreciate hearing it from you. I'm not there yet, but I'm looking at it from over there going, okay, trying to sniff it out.
I think there's a shorter, like, how do you say that? Like, closer to home, closer to where we are if we're not at that place of believing that the energy we can use the energy to change things. Look at what the misinformation is about a group. Like, if you're a white person, look at the misinformation about Latinos, African Americans, Chinese Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and speak the truth about the truth, like, bring the opposite energy. So the energy is, oh, dangerous. So what do I feel so safe with you. Because the internalization of those messages is there too, right? So if you can say to somebody, oh, it's so good to see you. It's so good to see you, I mean, it's risky because some people are, sensitive, like, oh, you're just saying that, right?
Right.
They're already like primed for some kind of patronizing
Right.
disrespect. But even if you don't say it, like, oh, somebody's on TV, you say, oh, I love that person. Look at that beautiful skin tone. This happened in my relationship where my wife would look at me and she'd say, oh my God, look at all these colors in your skin. It's so beautiful. It's so alive. And at first I'd be like, oh, what is wrong with you? That's creepy. It was like my my internalized oppression would be activated by her loving my color. But that's part of the healing, like to endure that, you know what I mean? Like, oh, this feels awful. Until, I could look and say, damn, you're right.
That's a beautiful, intimate example. Thank you. Yeah.
Because we don't, just look at what has the culture deprived us of and see where can you bring the opposite of deprivation.
For me, this is part of it. Because in my conditioning, and my ancestral condition, which is alive in my cells, you and I are not supposed to be talking. You know?
Right.
We're not supposed to be talking. So, I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mwah.
Very sweet. Nice.